Trades in the NBA are common, something every player understands is part of the business. But this isn't the story of how one Veto trade by David Stern led to the almost death of a player involved, but how the complete trajectory of the NBA was altered forever. NBA culture in the 2010s was completely foreign compared to what it is today. The CBA was less punishing, the face of the league was Kobe, but nothing stands out more than the hierarchy of the GOAT debate. At the time, we had Kobe chasing number 6, LeBron had just lost his second NBA Finals and had to figure out how to win one, let alone enter the GOAT conversation. Now let me set the stage here for you, as there were a lot of different factors that came into play that allowed this all to go down the way it did. Everything had to have happened the way it happened for it to have happened the way it happened. Now leading into the summer of 2011, the stage had been set for a massive shakeup, not only in LA, as they had just been swept by the Mavericks en route to their first championship, but the NBA was entering into a lockout that would last 161 days, which began on July 1st and ended on December 8th, which meant everyone knew that Lakers roster would look completely different when the next season started. But unknowingly at the time, the thing that would play the biggest role in all of this would be the fact that the NBA had taken control of the Hornets in December of 2010, a year prior. As the NBA opened up shop on December 8th, the Lakers wasted no time and agreed in principle to a trade that would send Pau Gasol to the Rockets and Lamar Odom to the Hornets, which would then bring CP3, Chris Paul to the Lakers. And with there being rumors of Dwight Howard trying to get to LA, the NBA fandom was absolutely buzzing with the idea of a Kobe, CP3, Dwight Howard lineup. A big three that would even outshine the Heat in Miami. The table had finally been set for us to get that Kobe LeBron finals we'd all been begging for and get that true conclusion to who the best was in the NBA. And then in an instant, everything changed. Editor's note here: as a Lakers fan, I remember exactly where I was, what I was doing when I first read on ESPN that the Lakers were getting Chris Paul. I was beyond ecstatic, and I'm pretty sure I was jumping up and down on the couch screaming Kobe is going to finish with 7 championships. And I'll always believe that. You can't tell me if the Lakers had CP3, Kobe, and Dwight Howard that wouldn't have at least equaled one more championship, and that changes everything. Drink your water. Do it. And this is where we really entered the twilight zone for Chris Paul, the Lakers, the Hornets, and really the entire NBA. On Thursday, December 8th, 2011, the 3-team trade between the Lakers, Rockets, and Hornets had been agreed to in principle. And within just a few hours, when it had leaked to the press, to the rest of the NBA, you had owners like Dan Gilbert of the Cavaliers already reaching out to the NBA and complaining, saying this was making a complete mockery of the CBA they had just signed. And then the news had finally broke that the NBA had vetoed the trade between the 3 teams. David Stern's reasoning at the time was that as he was the owner of the Hornets, he judged the return not good enough to keep that franchise viable. And we'll get a little bit deeper into what he meant in a moment. Now, as you can imagine, there was complete chaos and confusion in both LA, both in New Orleans. No one really knew what was happening. This was really the first time anything like this had happened. The NBA had never just stepped in and stopped a trade like this, until a better understanding of what we talked about earlier when the Hornets had been sold to the NBA back in December 2010, which meant the NBA had last say in a trade just like owners normally would. And over the next 2 days, December 9th and December 10th, the Lakers, the Hornets, they were working frivolously, trying so hard to get something to work, put something together that would appease the NBA. And then on Sunday, December 11th, just when things couldn't get even crazier for the Lakers, Lamar Odom demanded a trade. Almost every one of my channel's viewers is not subscribed to the channel. Do me a huge favor and hit that subscription button. We're trying to get monetized. My dog and I. Now, for those of you who do remember Lamar Odom, you do remember him as being a very emotional player. He was always so invested in the game. And if you know the way the Lakers were structured at the time, or at least before this recent sale, they were really focused around being a family business. So when a big trade like this goes down, the people involved are hit really heavy because they're all considered to be family, which is exactly why Lamar Odom then went into one of the biggest tailspins we've ever seen an NBA athlete go through. And then 2 days later, that knife was pushed all the way into the Lakers when the Clippers and the Hornets agreed to a trade that would send Chris Paul to the Clippers, Eric Gordon, Al-Farouq Aminu, Chris Kaman, that 2012 Wolves first, to the Hornets, and Lob City was officially born. And Kobe's career was officially put into a coffin because we all know what came after, which we'll get to in a moment. Now, one thing that is very interesting to consider for those of you that like to think about conspiracies in the NBA, especially with what just happened with Luka, Cooper Flag, and that trade to the Lakers, that following spring in April 2012, Ted Benson bought those Hornets. And a few months later in June, in that NBA draft, the Hornets ended up drafting Anthony Davis with the #1 pick. Funny how that works. Now, the question everyone really is asking, was the trade really that bad that the NBA needed to step in to stop it on behalf of the Hornets? The answer is no. Both the GM of the Lakers, Mitch Kupchak, and the GM of the Hornets, Dale Demps, they both agreed that thousands of hours have been put together to make this trade happen, and both teams believed it was a good trade. This really wasn't some lopsided trade for the Lakers like Pau Gasol originally was in the way he got to LA, but this was a real trade that got got all teams better, except the NBA wasn't interested in the Hornets being a better playing team. They wanted to be a better selling team. And what that means is that the NBA wanted to make sure that they could put together a package that could be appealing, alluring to a group of investors and letting them know, saying, hey, this is a team with a bunch of assets that you can trade for stars, or this is a team with a star on it that can be built around to win a championship soon. But at the end of the day, I still just don't believe this was really done without bias. As we talked about before, this trade completely altered the NBA trajectory. Everything was different after this trade. LA, for the first time in history, had a both competitive Clippers team and Lakers team that could finally battle for the throne of LA. We saw the creation of Lob City with Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, which gave us some of the most eccentric highlights we've ever seen. And while this Clippers team greatly underperformed, they never made a finals, never made a Western Conference Finals, they absolutely came into play in the teams they upset and beat in the short time they were in the playoffs. For the Lakers, they would essentially lose Lamar Odom for nothing to the Mavericks. Pau Gasol would be completely alienated and his stats would plummet. And of course, they never got CP3, which then did lead to another moment of hope in summer 2012 when the Lakers pivoted to Steve Nash and Dwight Howard would absolutely fall apart to injuries. All these misfires would essentially accelerate Kobe's decline. And of course, for the Hornets, they ended up with Anthony Davis, which gave them a few good years until he ended up backstabbing them to go to the Lakers. Now, throughout this whole ordeal, there may have been a person who was no more hurt than Lamar Odom. If it wasn't already enough of an emotional roller coaster of being on the Kardashians and involved with that family, him being a Laker was part of his soul, his heart, and when it was ripped from him, his entire life fell apart and he entered a pretty horrible depression, and most unfortunately, a close call with death. Pau Gasol's image as a professional was hit. How embarrassing was it to be traded like that as a two-time back-to-back winner, the second piece on that dynasty? If you followed his time as a Laker, when he came to LA, he was a rather soft guy that it felt like Kobe had to do a lot of toughening up with. But it worked. Pau Gasol ended up making some of the toughest plays, developing a mindset that got him through those Celtics, all for it to come crumbling down when the team that built him up told him he wasn't valuable anymore. Chris Paul, who's now returning to the Clippers to finish out his career there, will most likely retire without a single ring, and this time with the Lakers that he might have had would have undoubtedly been the best shot he ever got. That core of Chris Paul, Dwight Howard, and Kobe Bryant would have been very, very tough to beat. And even though nothing is guaranteed, we all know he would have gotten closer than he ever did. And then of course there's Kobe Bryant, who never got the ending to his career that he truly deserved. If you look at all the events that led up to his Achilles tearing, it all really comes down to the fact that he had to play so much harder because he didn't have a player like Chris Paul to help carry the load. And if Chris Paul becomes a Laker, Kobe doesn't have to go on that crazy 10-game stretch right before he tore his Achilles, and history is completely rewritten. And then there's some of the long-term effects, like if the Lakers would have won a championship between 2012 and 2015, does LeBron still come to LA? What happens when Pau goes to the Rockets? Do they still trade for Harden? Do we have a Harden, Nene, Pau Gasol trio there? What kind of ruckus could they have made? Do Kawhi and Paul George still go to the Clippers years later if they don't develop the reputation that CP3 helped create? All in all, this is one of those situations that's very easily misconstrued if you don't understand all the details, and even as a Lakers fan, it does upset me, but I do understand why the trade didn't go through. Objectively, I do believe it was a good trade. Subjectively, I think it was a great trade, but at the end of the day, it didn't happen, and history is the way it is. Let me know in the comments, what are your thoughts? Should the trade have gone through? Was it a fair trade? Was it a bad trade? Was it a bad look for the NBA? And what do you think the NBA would have looked like if the trade had gone through? Is Kobe the GOAT, or is Kobe already the GOAT? Alright, that's enough yapping for today. Hit that subscription button, and as always, go out there and do something great. Or don't. I mean, no, definitely do, for sure. You should.